Okay, we're back to the PowerPoint and keep going. So, normal bones needs calcium phosphate. These vitamins, which are take part in the growth and formation of bones, and growth hormone and these sex hormones and thyroid hormone are both involved in maintenance of the health of the bone and the growth until most people get to puberty, and sex hormones will cause male bodies to generate much larger bones with uh, attachment points for muscles. So the bones are continuously remodeled, and as I said, it reflects applied loads and mineral turnover. Uh, the bone has this calcium always available. Calcium is available in the blood, and the bones store calcium. So the calcium phosphate hardens the collagen in the bones, and bones are very active tissue. If you break one, you know that there are nerves that are going to uh, hurt it when you break a bone. Okay, if you don't exercise, you're going to be old and flabby like Dr. Clifford. So, as I said, the bones store calcium up to 99%. The release is controlled by parathyroid hormone, calcitrol, and calcitonin. We'll talk about where those come from when we get to the endocrine system, but it's absolutely essential that uh, calcium in the blood and in the extracellular fluid is very, very important for function of all cells, in particular nerves and muscle. So if a bone is fractured, you first form a hematoma, and then uh, mitosis in the periosteum and endosteum. Those uh, bones are remodeled. Callus will be part of the process, an accumulation of uh, forming a hematoma and building a new bone to repair it. So we got all you want to know is what's here. So let's keep going. Okay, when you get older, you're going to have lose mineral content. Women lose 8% per decade, men lose 3% per decade. Spongy bone is the most affected at the ends of long bones in the vertebrae and in the jaws. So keep exercising, uh, keep your weight down, eat a plant based diet. Bone markings are the specialized structures that are formed to help form joints and to help uh, form attachment sites for muscles. We'll talk about parts of the bone, and let's go through uh, these characteristics. Make sure you uh, know the definitions of uh, these various bone markings and the depressions and openings and so on. So take a good look at this table. So look at the long bone. You should know that there'll be WebAssign questions on the femur and the humerus in the upper arm and the pelvis. So uh, we'll learn the bones of the skull and the parts of the long bones, the femur, and the condyle. Here's an example of bone markings, tubercle, fossa, tuberosity, and so on. So we'll learn to name some bones. We're not going to do all of them. We're going to do a collection on WebAssign. So there's two divisions of the skeleton. You have the central axial. So that includes the ribs and the vertebrae and this central part of the skeleton, and then all of the limbs are in the appendicular skeleton. So we look from the rear, you can see the excuse me, the axial skeleton, and so the axial skeleton is the ribs and the vertebrae, the central skeleton. The appendicular skeleton is the all of the limbs attached to the central skeleton. So for these names, just basically know all these names of the bone. We're going to focus on the femur, some on the pelvis, some on the hands and feet. Bones of the cranium will have a lot of activity. So frontal bone, parietal, temporal bone. So there'll be questions about these sutures, about these bones, parietal, frontal, temporal, the mandible, the zygomatic bone, the external acoustic canal, which is where the Q-tip goes when you stick it in your ear. You have the mastoid process, the styloid process. So let's look at the bones of the face. Okay, so pay particular attention. We'll talk about the sphenoid right here, the temporal bone right behind it. Here's the parietal bone, here's the frontal bone. The lacrimal bone is forming the process where the tear ducts drain tears from the eye and dump into the nasal cavity. So we'll need to know parietal, sphenoid, temporal, ethmoid, lacrimal, maxillary, zygomatic, the inferior nasal conchae, which are in the pathway of the nasal cavity, and their job is to cause air to swirl around as you breathe in and to warm the air. So your job is to, you'll see from WebAssign what bones you have to know. The inferior view, again, you'll see from WebAssign what bones are required. So look through these images and start working on WebAssign. And remember, do the practices over and over. Here's our view from the horizontal section from above. So your job is to look at these structures and decide what the structures in the images that you should know. Here's a cross section of the skull. So you take WebAssign, decide what bones you have to know. Okay. Here's a cross section, sagittal section of the area in the nasal cavity. These are called the nasal conchae. They are there to cause the air to swirl and warm itself before it gets into your, goes down into your lungs. Okay, the frontal sinus. Know the location of the sinuses. Do we know what they do? Who knows? Okay, let's stop there and go back to here. Let's stop the recording for a moment. Stop recording.